The beauty of no self-realization, though, is nothing can be hidden anymore. And that can be really wonderful, and it can also be kind of ghastly for a while, in the sense that you can't hide any of your stuff from yourself anymore or anyone else. As I mentioned before, maybe it was yesterday, I never intend for anyone to hold heavily anything I say or a paradigm that I describe, to adopt that and then use it as a sort of rigid framework for your own experience or to judge your experience by. Like, I never intend that, of course. And at the same time, sometimes it's helpful to describe things in certain ways that do sound like a framework, but really, therefore, mostly for pointing in the moment. Therefore, exploring your experience right now and perhaps finding something you hadn't quite discovered before, or rediscovering something that you had maybe forgotten in a way. And once that discovery has occurred, once that rediscovery has occurred, then really what I said before that doesn't matter. The pointing doesn't matter. It's really your own direct insight, your own direct experience. This is for you. And it may or may not work well in this moment. It may or may not lead you to a deeper insight or a different insight or a clearer experience. Either way is fine, of course. But that's the idea here. So hopefully, as you're listening, that encourages you to refrain from like trying to memorize what I'm saying, trying to analyze what I'm saying, and just let it in. Just sort of try it on, so to speak. If I point a certain way, like, hey, try to look at a thought this way, you just sort of like try, kind of go along with that. And if something clicks, if something opens up, if something clarifies, just let that experience itself take you deeper into it. You can even tune me out if that happens. There's always going to be recordings and things like that. But the important thing is, it's not what I'm saying that's the transmission, or what I'm saying is not the message. The message is really from within you. It's a sort of deeper calling. That's what brings you here. That's what brings us all here. And I'm just sort of trying to hand a message that says, hey, can you look this way? Can you perhaps try looking this way? And all of a sudden you see that sort of portal into the deeper part of yourself that I'm talking about. That's it. That's all this is. It's very, very simple. It's a very simple process, actually. And it has to do with you, not me. And it has to do with you right now, not you 5 minutes ago or 10 minutes ago or 10 years ago. It's only right now, and it's only your own direct experience. So the beauty of that message, if you let that land, is that you have everything you need already. You don't need to go out and find something. You don't need to go out and find the right technique. You don't need to go out and find the right teacher. You don't need to go out and find the right paradigm or new way of looking at your experience. It's already there. Everything you need is really already there. Everything you need for clear realization is already there. In fact, it's so obvious that it's almost hidden. Very strange, very paradoxical. But what I'm pointing to is so right in front of your face right now that it almost makes me laugh a lot of times when I talk about this, because I'm the old saying of selling water by the river. Like, how can I sell water by the river? And you're the river. Like, you are the river already. The river is flowing through you. It's so clear. And maybe the only thing that gets in the way of that is doubt. That's a big part of it. Even I see it in like deeper realization. People have a lot of clarity, even clarity of non-duality or no self even. And still there can be those sneaking doubts. Oh, this must not be it. I must not have it right. Which is great, right? Because the narrative itself tells you where the issue is. It tells you where to look, right? If you know that there, for instance, just as an example, if you absolutely know with the deepest part of your non-being, that there's no actual separate self. There's no structured self anywhere. That's just not there. You know that within the deepest part of your being. But then the noisy little mind says, oh, wait a minute, but you probably don't have that right. Like, which one do you believe, right? It's fascinating. So the mind has this way of it's almost like we find ourselves inside the doubt already, rather than notice, oh, here comes a doubt. Should I believe that doubt or not? It's a doubt thought. Nah, that's just a thought floating by. It's nothing. It's a ghost, right? It's more like you find yourself in the doubt. You're already looking through the doubt. And it's tricky in deeper realization, actually, in some sense, because it's the looking through part. It's the feeling of being oriented to something, even if it's a doubt, that feels like what you want to grab onto, kind of. Because what else am I going to orient to, right? That's the thing with no self. It's like there's no orientation either. As several people have said to me when that shift has happened for them, the shift of no self, it's like, oh, wow, I kind of knew that self wasn't really there, but I didn't realize how much goes away. Like, I didn't realize, like, oh, there's no self. There's also nothing that self ever related to. And then you see everything that you thought was all backward extrapolated from the self. It was like the self has this relational matrix that makes everything seem so real in a certain way, in the way the mind thinks of real, in opposed to unreal. And then all of a sudden, when there's no self to hold, when there's no self for all of that to refer back to, even if it's mostly unconscious, then all of a sudden that doesn't really exist in the way you thought it did at all. So that can be uncomfortable, or it doesn't have to be. But the point is it's disorienting. It makes orientation challenging, and a very fundamental mechanism of selfing. Right? You can see that there's no self, and there can still be a sense of selfing. Like I've heard it said, you can see that there is no me, but there's still a mine. Like my life, my tendencies, my thoughts, all of it, my problems, my addictions, right? And that's very true. That operating mechanism of selfing can still be going. And maybe the most fundamental aspect of that is that subtle sense of, I don't know about subtle, I'll just say fundamental. It's kind of in the background all the time. Sense of trying to orient to anything, to a paradigm, to a world, to a self, to a relationship, to a problem. It's amazing how much energy we have put into orienting to problems. It's fascinating, actually, right? Of all the things you could orient to, it's amazing how much time we spend struggling with problems that we created in our own mind. It's amazing. And you get a lot of encouragement to do that from other people who are doing it, right? That's like news and politics and all this. Not that it's not important to pay attention to what's going on in the world, but to get really caught up in it, which probably all of us have. I know I have, political things or whatever it is, right? That's your own making. It's your own mind constructing that in the moment. And we can put so much investment into that kind of orientation, right? Maybe that's a good exploration. Why do we want to orient to a problem? Well, part of it is that underlying seeking mechanism. It's kind of the evil step twin of doubt or something. It's the one that says, oh yeah, I know you don't feel good now, but we can feel good later when you get this. Right? When you solve the problem, then you'll be okay. When you solve the problem of whatever, it could be anything. Relationships are really, treasured areas for us to perseverate on. It can be a financial issue, it can be a health issue. And then when you get into this space, it's a spiritual thing, right? The spiritual cookie that you're looking for, right? That seeking mechanism has that sense of, again, you're in the thought by the time it's there. You don't notice it coming by and decide to have the thought. It's like you're already in the thought that just already assumes something's wrong. Of course I don't feel good. So, but hey, it's okay that I don't feel good. I can feel good later when I get whatever it is, right? That underlying mechanism feeds really nicely into why we actually choose problems to orient to. Because you can orient to all kinds of things, right? Maybe that's kind of the... people ask about the law of attraction a lot. Maybe the law of attraction is kind of like just teaching you, like, you can orient to other things. You don't have to orient to problems. You can orient to solutions. You can orient to creativity, like whatever. But these are still orientations. And I'm not saying they're not valuable. I'm just saying, when we really get deep in realization, you realize that even that fundamental sense of trying to orient doesn't have to be there. It's not totally natural, I will say. It's just not, you won't find it. But the tendency to orient can be strong even after no self. It can be really strong after no self for a while. The beauty of no self-realization, though, is nothing can be hidden anymore. And that can be really wonderful, and it can also be kind of ghastly for a while, in the sense that you can't hide any of your stuff from yourself anymore or anyone else. And hopefully you're in a good environment and get good feedback about that, accurate feedback, and it can kind of start to take care of itself. And it will. But, if you think like the realization of no self is like immediate bliss and the sense of ongoing liberation, it's not necessarily, not right away. But the fundamental distorting factor that is the most fundamental distorting factor, the most fundamental of the distorting factors, is now out of the way, and that's the subtle self structure, which is subtle when it's operating. When it's not operating, it's not subtle at all. It's not subtle that it's not there. It's the most obvious thing in the world. You can't forget that. Like, there's not 1 second I can like forget that there's no self. Even that. It's not like you have to remember it either. But so it's so obvious when it's gone. But yeah, when it's there, it is rather subtle in that you can easily overlook it. Easily. Many people have had awakenings, and many people teach from the experience of having had an awakening and a very clear experience of unbound consciousness. But the self-structure is still intact for sure, which is fine. But just know that it's that subtle, actually. I don't know if you have to go looking for it, that it's that subtle, but it helps. And there are ways to do that, of course. But most of the time I see when it's dropped, people either it just drops on its own, sometimes very randomly, or it's like, it's there, you sense it's there, you can't find it, you never find it, and you won't find it, which makes it even more challenging. And if you have clear non-dual realization, there's nothing to look for it with. There's that. So that, even that can be disorienting. But when it's gone, it's a whole different sort of world, in the sense that there can be tendencies, as I'm describing. What I'm really getting back to is that tendency to orient, that tendency to find a view of, like, an inherent view of reality, a tendency to do that at all. There can be that tendency, and it's not about anyone or anything anymore. It's just there, which is really weird. In one way of speaking, it's very strange, but it's kind of strong. So it's trying to orient somewhere. It's trying to find a paradigm. It's trying to find a way that the world is. It's trying to find because if I know the way the world is, I know the way I need to be in reference to it. That sort of subtle mechanism is still trying to operate, and it has nowhere to operate. It's like, I'm trying to just make up an analogy. It's like getting stuck in the mud or something in a car, like the wheels are spinning, and you're like, oh God, if I could just get out of this mud, and then you get out of the car and there's no mud and there's no car, but it's something still stuck, like something's still trying to do something. It's very strange, these mechanisms. It's like trying to get traction where there's no way to get traction, but the trying to get traction is still happening. It's like trying to form a view when you know it's not possible, and yet there's still something trying to do it. And I guess by definition, that is disorienting. Violet, this is funny. Violet's mom was staying with her for a little while, and Violet was playing Adyashanti's, one of his something, I don't know what it was, just audio in the background, and they were listening to it or whatever. And I think Violet was listening to it like in the kitchen. Her mom was in the other room doing something else, and her mom says, if he says disorienting one more time. But it's true. That's what it is. It's disorienting can have a connotation of like your head is spinning and you're confused and stuff, and it can be like that. But it's actually more fundamental than that. It's the tendency to orient at all, the need to orient is actually going away. And that specific aspect, I think, is really the freedom aspect. You hear people talk about freedom, the freedom of liberation. That's the freedom aspect. And there's no way that if there's a self-structure and ego structure remaining, there's no way that can understand freedom in the way I'm talking about it. There's no way. It will understand freedom in the way it wants freedom. And it wants freedom to do whatever it wants to be. It wants freedom of control. Freedom of, I can control anything. That's kind of how it perceives it, I think. But I know it can't perceive it directly how it is, because the freedom is from that from that orienting mechanism. That's what the freedom is from. And any remaining self will not like that. It will not feel good. Any clinging area will not feel good. Anything holding, grasping, trying to control, it won't feel good at all. It'll feel worse than ever, right? And that's really good news, because that's the only way it's going away. And that's the only way you can really know true freedom, which is available to all of us. Now, I am talking about sort of deep stage realization. I'm talking about no self realization. And by the way, this is a bit of an aside, but I don't know why I feel like speaking about it. Occasionally I'll see someone, and sometimes even teachers or even sort of prominent teachers, really kind of discount this idea of stages of realization. And I understand that. I think I understand why they're saying it. And there may be more than one reason. One of the reasons is they don't know it. They actually aren't realized that. They've realized, like unbound consciousness, that I am sense, that it's a big awakening for most people, and that just feels like, oh, well, how could there be anything other than this, So I think part of it is that, but sometimes I think it's like a more nuanced understanding of the human psyche, that they don't want to mislead people into thinking this is about maps or map making or thinking about maps. Because some people get really obsessed about maps, right? And it's a mental thing. And they're like, no, it's not the mental thing. And I'm like, yeah, of course. I say that as well. It's not. I'm not giving you a map so you can think about a map. That's not the point. At the same time, if I don't talk about the fact that there are certainly different insights that come, and they are deeper, they're kind of nested, then I'm just not saying the whole truth. So, I don't know. I just feel like saying that on occasion. Yeah, and it can lead to some problems. The map making thing, the mental, like, oh wow, how does this fit into that? And what is this, compared to that? And people will give me terms and go, is this the term you mean by this? And never like answering those questions, because I can just feel what they're doing. I think that is, they're trying to make a map, they're trying to understand it. It's, and it can be fun to get up in consciousness and the thoughts and like analyze shit and all that stuff. But it's not what I'm talking about, of course. The first awakening itself is actually, in a sense, it's an awakening of non-conceptuality. It's an awakening from conceptuality. But that's just the beginning. And it does go deeper than that. So yeah, language is inherently tricky with all this stuff for these reasons. But anyway, so I was kind of pointing to a deeper stage phenomenon of trying to orient. Do y'all relate to that? Is this relatable? If it's not, that's fine. Okay. All right. Sometimes it's just blank faces and I don't really know I don't know. It may not be relatable. So I want to, but I do want to relate that back actually to one of the more fun, interesting, and challenging parts of this kinds of pointing that I do. And it's really what I did in the guided meditation, talking about unbound consciousness. How did that land? Did that feel good? Awesome. Yeah, I did it for you. Partially. I mean, these things come out of conversations we have and all that.